So have you ever been like intimidated or afraid of talking to someone, for instance, right? Raise your hand if you've ever been afraid or intimidated of talking to someone. So let's say that there's oh my gosh, Mark Anthony Bates is here too. Oh my gosh, this is so fun to see some old friends and family here. All right. So let's say that you've heard of Mark. Mark is like this legend, and you hear about all the incredible things you do. And he walks around the events, and everyone's surrounding him, and he's like this superstar, and you're like awestruck by him. Now, if you have this image in your mind that he is superior to you and that you might get rejected, that you might not be cool enough to be in Mark's presence, right? If you have this unconscious fear that somehow you look stupid, you're not going to know the right thing to say. And this could be like walking up and talking to a beautiful girl or talking to a celebrity. Like if you have that perception and you imagine something bad might happen, then that fear might keep you from approaching and introducing you to Mark, right? But just switching the coin around and looking at Mark and thinking, man, that guy is so incredible. I bet that if I spend time with him, we're going to have the most mind-blowing conversations. I can't wait to be able to connect with him and find out what he's all about and find out what's important to him. Then all of a sudden, that exact same situation, just because you have a different imagination of that future event, turns from fear to excitement. It's amazing how fast you can alchemize that exact same experience just by simply imagining. You know, when you need to do some sales calls, rather than being afraid of them saying no, picking up the phone and getting excited because you know they're going to say a yes. All you're doing is imagining that there's a yes waiting for you. And you can apply this to anything, right? I remember when I was writing a book. So I had this book that I was writing after my divorce. I had written this book called The Marriage Advice I Wish I Would Have Had, you know, and I'd been invited on the Today Show. I had all of these people like wanting me to create this book, and it was there, and I knew what I needed to say in this book. But every time I sat down to write, I was like, oh, right, I got writer's block. I was afraid. And every time I was like, what is this about? And I realized that unconsciously, the reason why I had writer's block and all this stuff come up and why I kept procrastinating over and over and over again was because when I sat down and when I imagined it, I was afraid of all the critics. I was afraid of the haters. And I was afraid of the responsibility. I was afraid of too many people looking for my advice. I was afraid of losing my freedom. I had all of these unconscious pictures that I had placed in my mind about writing a book, which I didn't understand why I was procrastinating, why I was holding back, why I was like I knew the message was important. I knew it would change lives. But if I subconsciously believed I was going to lose freedom, I was going to be criticized, and people were going to hate me, why would I ever write a book? And so my brain was subconsciously preventing me from doing that. And I didn't even realize that those fears were there. But when I actually got present with it, it's like, oh my gosh, what is this about? What you'll find is with your fears, when you actually go into the fears, you'll realize what you're really afraid of isn't even there. It's like these shadow monsters that like the moment you actually step into it, it's like, oh, I was afraid of this. And just by simply shifting the picture that I started focusing on my mind, the energy alchemized within me, right? So I began imagining holding the book in my hand and feeling really proud and handing it to people I loved and having them receive it with appreciation. I imagine receiving these emails from people that are like, thank you so much. That changed my life. That was incredible. I began imagining having a team that could help support me in sharing that message. I began imagining these things, and all of a sudden, guess what happened? Just like that, the energy shifted from fear of moving away to like it pulled me forward. It was almost like this energy. It's like I couldn't find enough time. I was so excited. Every time I was like, oh my gosh, I got a free hour. I can't wait. And that energy that pulled me into the work rather than pushed me away, simply by alchemizing that energy. Does it make sense?